So today I'll be talking about intermusicality and musical remembrance, convergence of Muslim-Jewish soundscapes in the private songs of Iraqi Jews. So I'll start with the personal. My mother and grandmother were among the hundreds of thousands of Iraqi Jews who emigrated from Iraq to Israel in the 1950s. For as long as I can remember, they have recounted the rich details of their distinctive traditions, food, and music. Their memories often surface in the form of song, as intricate, improvised Arabic melodies, inspired by their personal experiences of grief, joy, and tragedy. Over time, as I eventually became a scholar and an ethnomusicologist, these songs became the focus of my work. I broadened my research towards the wider Iraqi Jewish community in Israel and spent 2.5 years conducting ethnographic fieldwork, researching this rare and fragmented musical practice. The individuals whom I interviewed all share similar formative experiences of cultural dislocation associated with their abrupt immigration from Iraq to Israel. Most of them were born and raised in Iraq, and virtually all of them are musical amateurs. I have a couple pictures of some of the people with whom I worked here. You can clearly see the more elderly character of this demographic. Due to the resocialization of Iraqi Jews into Israeli society, younger generations do not improvise these songs. Thus, they are not commonly sung and remain largely under the public radar. In fact, of the over 125 Iraqis that I interviewed, only 15 among them shared their practice of private singing with me. In total, these individuals shared approximately 100 songs, which form the core of my research. So today I will consider these songs from the perspective of intermusicality, or what I understand to be the intertextuality of Jewish, Muslim, popular Arab, and sacred soundscapes. In this process, I hope to convey how private songmaking forms a unique site of remembrance for Iraqi Jews, and in particular, how these individuals draw from different musical sources in processing personal memories and life experiences that straddle cultural, religious, and national divides. In order to give you a sense of the content and quality of these songs, I will begin with 2 brief examples that arose over the course of my research before moving on to a more extensive 3rd example that I will analyze in detail. As these songs are often deeply personal, it is important to note that much of this material is bound by issues of confidentiality. Thus, I use pseudonyms and other forms of biographical obfuscation where requested and in consultation with my interlocutors in order to protect their identities. My first example stems from a 2015 meeting. I am sitting with an Iraqi Jewish woman named Habiba on her balcony in Ramat Gan. Aromas from the dinner she has prepared waft onto her terrace. Roasted cumin from sambusak turnovers, and sautéed coriander with cassia bark rolled into fried kubba. All foods associated with her childhood in Baghdad. As these intoxicating fragrances surround us, she recalls how she prepared a similar meal almost 70 years ago, on the night her sister was kidnapped by a Muslim sheikh. Suddenly, Habiba begins to sing her own version of the well-known Iraqi lullaby, Dililol, the same song she sung to her sister as a young child. Her lyrics compare her sibling to a precious drop of water, one that was swept away in a large stream, never to be returned. Through poetic metaphor, she tells of her sister's conversion to Islam, a topic considered so shameful that it is only obliquely addressed through song. Her haunting melody draws from melodic modes associated with themes of grief and mourning in both Quranic recitation and Babylonian Jewish liturgy. Her song thus evokes sonic remembrances of life in Iraq, while her lyrics portray the heartbreak she feels for the sister she left behind. In another example, it is 2016, and I am sitting outside of a wedding party in Jerusalem with two elderly Iraqi brothers. Surrounded by a feast replete with fresh-baked pita and large bowls of aromatic amba, the brothers begin to reminisce about the foods and festivities of their youths in Basra. As their memories deepen, they begin to sing a unique, personal rendition of the famous song, Ahya wa Amut al-Basra, Basra, I Live and Die for You, originally popularized in the 1950s on Iraqi radio. Through unique turns of phrase, these brothers utilized the song as a template for improvising personal lyrics that detail their deep affection and devotion for the beloved city of their youth. Such types of song-making, where singers incorporate biographical lyrics into known modal frameworks and song forms, is not without precedent in Iraq. Several musicologists, including Scheherazade Hassan and Yitzhak Abishur, have described such personal song performances, found among untrained Iraqi singers, that have a presence in the region dating back to at least the 19th century. These songs often accompany moments of intimacy and heightened emotionality, and are prevalent among Iraqis of various religious affiliation. As is evident from the previous anecdotes I shared, I found that moments of song-making were inextricable from intimate domestic gatherings and culinary celebrations. Among many Iraqi Jews, memories of geographic space, including old residences and neighborhoods, converge with culinary remembrances of the foods associated with these places. These memories compound similar synesthetic modalities of taste and sight with musical memories of sound, allowing for multiple levels of sensorial remembrance and retrieval. Let us delve deeper into a discussion of a particularly poignant song I encountered during my fieldwork. It is a rainy afternoon in 2016, and I am in an apartment in Bnei Brak. My friend Margalit has invited me over with the promise that she would personally teach me how to make kuba. At her apartment, there are two other Iraqi women present, one of whom is Margalit's older sister. The bond these women share with one another becomes apparent over the hours they spend recalling cherished and painful memories, helping create a space of vulnerability and trust. Over the course of the evening, we share in the experience of crafting kuba together, wetting our hands as we cup semolina into our palms, and rounding the flour around a mixture of onions and spiced meat. In the process, the women present reveal stories and songs of their lives. Margalit begins. Speaking in a mixture of Hebrew and Arabic, she recounts the story of her first love. Quote, "I did not marry until I was already considered an old woman," she told us, and my mother cried and cried over this. When we first came to Israel, I fell in love with a vuz named David. Everyone laughs at her use of the word vuz, which, as much of us know, is a derogatory term used to refer to Ashkenazim. She continues, "I was in nursing school at the time. I remember I was the only Iraqi, and all the other students would call me Schwarze, which is a Yiddish word meaning black. But David didn't care. One day, David took me to meet his mother in Tel Aviv. His family treated me badly. When they served me food, they gave very small amounts. Finally, David's mother said to me, 'I don't want a Schwarze in my family.' David was my first love, but we had to separate. The pressure was too much for us." After this statement, Margalit takes a deep breath, and silence fills the room. Suddenly, she begins to sing in a solemn, wistful manner. I would like to play her song for you now. As we listen, you can follow the Arabic transliteration and translation on the slide. I had some formatting difficulties incorporating the Arabic script, but if anyone would like to see it, I have it with me and will be happy to share it with you after the talk. So here is her song.
حسبت شلون أنا بالفقر وهو بالغنى أنا منين وهو منين حبيته بالعينتين.
So in her song, Margalit draws upon a variety of musical and textual resources. Most notably, her melody is situated within a wider system of musical modes known as maqam, one that is found among Jewish, Muslim, religious, semi-sacred, and secular musical forms. Maqam can refer to melodic structures and processes, but also embraces a whole body of theory, songs, and performance conventions that form the groundwork for how melody is performed in religious and secular soundscapes across the region. A key aspect of maqam performance lies in the ability of singers to harness shared emotional states and sentiments among performers and listeners alike. When Kulthum would perform maqam, for example, it was noted that audience members would often faint out of ecstasy and emotional delight. The particular mode Margalit utilizes in her song is maqam Kurd, a mode found in more contemporary forms of Arab popular music, and one deeply associated with sentiments of heartache and pain. So Kulthum's Hagartak, if anyone knows that, is in this mode as well. Margalit's vocal delivery is also characteristic of maqam performance. She employs a rich vocal tone, and one can almost hear her voice cracking with emotion as she delivers her poignant lyrics. She incorporates an extensive amount of melisma, or vocal movement, through a succession of notes within a single syllable of text. Even if you don't read music, here's a transcription, and you can see how many of the textual lines carry over across the melodic movement. Notably, her song emphasizes what would be the fourth note of the modal scale in this performance. So it's the note she starts on there. For those who read music, it's the B. And she displays a slow descending contour, so her melody falls as she sings. These all are musical characteristics that situate her song firmly within this mode. That Margalit and other Iraqi Jews possess such extensive knowledge of these melodic modes is perhaps not surprising when considered in light of their lived experiences. Their exposure was enhanced by the dominant role of Jewish instrumentalists in popular and art music of Iraq. And in my interviews with her, Margalit explained how her exposure began with the music of professional Iraqi musicians. As a child, she often listened to recordings of Salima Murad and the Al-Kuwaiti brothers, among others. She attended performances of professional troupes of female Jewish singers known as Dakaka, and was familiar with domestic and professional performances of lullabies, such as Dili Lol. After emigrating to Israel, furthermore, she regularly listened to bootleg tapes of Arab music, common in Mizrahi communities from the 1970s and on, as well as popular Iraqi and Egyptian songs broadcast on Shidurei Kol Yisrael Be'aravit, broadcasts of the Voice of Israel in Arabic, which was a radio program geared towards Arabic-speaking Jews. Her knowledge of maqam was further compounded through her exposure to melodic modes in synagogue settings, both in Iraq and Israel. Indeed, maqam performance is noted as having been a crucial component of the Jewish soundscape under Islam for centuries. This dates back to the late 16th century, when rabbis of Ottoman lands, including the famed Israel ben Najara, listened to Quranic recitation and frequented services of other faiths in order to learn particular maqamat and incorporate them into Jewish liturgy. The Mujawid style of Quranic recitation, for example, influenced the elaborate vocal stylings of famous Jewish chazanut, which draw from similar sonic resources. Of note, modal performance can vary depending on region. For example, the Babylonian tradition has strong ties to Iraqi maqam performance. A number of pan-Mizrahi synagogues in Israel, on the other hand, have developed what is known as the Yerushalmi Sephardic musical style, a variant of modal liturgy heavily influenced by Mashreki maqam systems and Egyptian popular song. Many Iraqi Jews, including Margalit, have frequented different synagogues that adhere to varying modal traditions, lending them a unique familiarity with each of them. And indeed, their songs are often deeply influenced by these liturgical modal forms. Now, in terms of text, we'll move on to lyrics. There we are. I will say that, as an aside, one of the great challenges, methodological challenges of these songs is discovering where some of these textual references that can often be quite subtle, where do they come from? So we'll start with some textual analysis. Margalit's lyrics open with a question, Hu amnein, u anamnein, where is he from and where am I from? Illustrating the vastly different cultural worlds from which both she and her lover hail. Margalit then employs this metaphor to question where the trouble between them comes from, subtly pointing to their cultural and socioeconomic differences as its source. Now this point, this exact metaphor, is an intertextual reference to a much older Iraqi song. Remarkably, it can be found in 19th century handwritten songs transcribed by Jews, as detailed by Professor Yitzhak Avishur. Their texts are in Rashi script. So, in the 19th century love song, we see the following text. Nachnu mnein, mnein, wal balwa mnein, mnein. Where are we from? Where is this trouble from? And this can be compared with Margalit's opening statement, Hu amnein, u anamnein, hada el balwa janatni mnein. Where does this trouble come from? So quite similar. Though the rest of the song lyrics differ lyrically between the two versions, both Margalit's song and that of the 19th century draw from highly similar thematic content. They both focus on the difficulty that sociocultural difference can pose in the context of amorous relationships, but ultimately proclaim the continuance of love nonetheless. Moving on to the other lyrics of her song, Margalit powerfully links her love for David with a description of eyes. Such amorous associations of the beloved have a lengthy historical presence in Arabic poetry and classical literature, both in a physical as well as a divine sense. This includes medieval Sufi poetry and Perso-Ottoman Ghazal texts. As a location where love enters the body, the eyes are considered a powerful lyrical trope for conveying the tormented emotions associated with love lost. The eye can also be conceived as a source of power, as when the eye of the beloved is viewed as a kind of Cupid's arrow, capable of hunting the lover. The eye's power is also noted in the highly prevalent regional conception of the jealous, evil eye, which has the power to wreak havoc upon an unsuspecting individual's life. Margalit's process of songmaking, then, like that of many of the Iraqi singers I encountered, draws from a well of musical and literary resources associated with the various cultural settings she has navigated over the course of her life. She interweaves snippets of melody, mode, musical form, and idioms that appear in other sources. And indeed, the diverse musico-poetic material of her songs can only be understood in relation to the life she has lived. A life of migration, transition, and cultural dislocation. Her song, then, is akin to a prism through which we can understand Iraqi Jewish musicality on the individual level. Not only do these private songs reveal how individuals internally negotiate fractured cultural loyalties, their mere presence in the sensory memories of Iraqi Jews underscores a shared history of interreligious musical contact among different religious and sectarian groups of Iraq. In many ways, Margalit's song is a scathing critique of the discrimination she and many other Iraqis faced within Israel's borders, prejudice that ultimately resulted in the loss of her great love. But her song must also be understood in conjunction with the other private songs she and elderly Iraqis sang for me, ones that remain hidden within the privacy of home and domestic celebrations. This is largely due to the environment in which these singers have been re-socialized, where belonging to an Arab past can, at times, contradict their nationalist present. Their musical materials remain shrouded behind layers of self-concealment, embarrassment, and even prideful defiance, themselves having undergone a kind of internal exile through processes of cultural erasure and assimilation. Not all of these songs tackle issues related to discrimination in Israel. Some depict more personal traumas, while others focus on happy, celebratory events. Some describe acts of unimaginable cruelty and violence, while others detail personal remembrances of beloved Iraqi friends, places, foods, and neighborhoods left behind. Yet the persistence of these deeply rooted musical and poetic forms speaks to their continued relevance among members of this aging community and their central role in processes of self-making and survival. Thank you.